Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 49 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rod Goodale. Thanks for joining me again. Today on the podcast, I'm going to have Tracey Wilson on. We're going to just kind of get a lay of the land of what's going on with this new liberal minority government. And we've been getting a lot of questions from people, a lot of emails coming into the CCFR head office, basically saying, you know, when do I got to hand in my guns or what's next? So this will be a great opportunity for you to listen and figure out exactly what a liberal minority government means to gun owners and some of the possible scenarios. I mean, we can't claim to know them all, of course, but at least if you're not familiar with how things work in Ottawa, this might be some insight that will be useful to you. All right, all that and a lot more right after this.
Once you lose rights, it's nearly impossible to get them back. Right now, there are politicians and bureaucrats working day and night to eliminate your ability to own and use firearms in Canada. They're talking about not allowing you to keep your firearms at home and even taking away the ones you already have. It's not a joke. It's not an exaggeration. Activism is a lot of work, and most people don't have the time. But something that you can do is support the CCFR. For $40 a year, you can be a part of the hardest working firearm organization in Canada and get $5 million worth of insurance. The CCFR lobbies government and works to improve the public image of gun owners through media and educational campaigns. Protect your own ability to own and use firearms before it's too late. Go to firearmrights.ca and click Why Join. That's firearmrights.ca.
All right, welcome back, everyone. What I'm going to do real quick before I bring Tracey on is I'm going to read our the CCFR statement on the results of the 2019 federal election. This is has been released as a web story on the firearmrights.ca website. Just for all of you that maybe haven't read it yet, or are driving, or haven't had a chance to look at it, this way you've heard it from me directly. Okay. Here we go. The CCFR is clearly disappointed in Monday's election results as pro-confiscation parties currently hold the balance of power in Canada. After working tirelessly over the last year to raise awareness of our cause and increase the public's understanding of our laws and regulations, we find ourselves in continued peril. In our efforts, both during the election season and before, we have seen a remarkable level of hyperbole, manipulation, defamation, and deception from the activist doctors group, many in the media, and from the Liberal government itself. The results of the 2019 federal election seem to indicate that a significant number of Canadians find this duplicity acceptable. Many in our community are fearful that confiscation of their property and condemnation of their identity is what awaits them in the coming months. This Liberal government promise may soon become a reality for hundreds of thousands of honest, hardworking Canadians. Despite our circumstances, our future may be hopeful. While Trudeau ran a divisive and fear-based campaign evidenced by his rhetoric on guns, the popular vote actually turned against him. It seems that most Canadians have heard enough and no longer believe him. The Liberal Party was severely rejected in the West, and the Bloc gained more seats in Quebec, while a mounting Western separatist movement may complicate things further for the Liberals. I don't have my glasses on, so bear with me. Despite our circumstance, our future may be hopeful. The good news is legislation takes time to formulate, even if banning and confiscating firearms is a top priority for the Liberals, and we'll see if it is. The use of orders in council as a method to expedite the Liberals' firearm agenda may not be appropriate for a weakly supported minority government, especially one which is declining in popularity. Although it wouldn't be a responsible use of OICs, it is still within their power to use them on short notice. While the Liberals are negotiating alliances to support their mandate, the CCFR will be executing its mandate. In the coming weeks, we will be finalizing our plans for the next 12 months, our projects, and the effect they will have on the public's view of the Liberal government's attacks on gun owners will be significant. The CCFR has put a tremendous amount of effort into advocacy in the months leading up to the election. The next 12 months will dwarf that in comparison. And by the way, I'm not joking about that. The CCFR is only beginning to fight. And with your continued support, we won't stop until we achieve the respect and rights that trustworthy, hardworking Canadians deserve. And then I also put a small note just to kind of give you guys an idea of where we've been in the last couple of months. So a small note at the end of that statement, it says, to gun owners across Canada, we have factually exposed the CBC of bias against our community via our fully referenced media bias report. We have reviewed the evidence and provided by a group of activist doctors who claimed it unequivocally supported their positions of a ban on handguns and so-called assault rifles. The evidence showed nothing of the sort, and we published our findings in our report, Intellectual Malpractice. We have produced explainer videos and a nationally broadcast television show now in its second season. We produce regular content like informational videos and the CCFR radio podcast and organized social media campaigns. We toured across parts of Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba in a fully wrapped RV to confront anti-gun politicians before the federal election. The CCFR always punches above its weight. Minority governments, like the Liberals are now, tend to call elections within 2 years. Help us hold off this Liberal minority to the next election and show them that we won't go quietly. Okay, that was a lot to say in a very short period of time, but that's what our statement was on the election. So I just wanted to read that to you in case you haven't had a chance to see it, as I mentioned, and that's kind of an important thing. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to come back, bring on Tracey, and then we're going to talk in fairly minute detail about what our options are and what we might be facing in the next little while with this Liberal minority government.
What would you think if you heard the government decided that your rifle or shotgun is now too dangerous to own? What if they told you that you couldn't keep it at your house, that you had to pay to store it at some central storage facility? What if they told you that you had to surrender it for destruction or go to jail? These actions are being discussed in government in Canada right now. Think about this. Have you taken any action whatsoever to prevent this from happening? Well, you can. For $40 a year, you can support the hardest working firearm organization in Canada, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, and get $5 million worth of insurance. The CCFR lobbies government and works to improve the public image of gun owners through media and educational campaigns. Protect your own ability to own and use firearms before it's too late. Go to firearmrights.ca and click Why Join. That's firearmrights.ca.
All right, I'm back. I've got Tracey Wilson, and let's talk this out, Tracey.
Well, Rod, it's been a rough 48 hours. I got to tell you. I did have a bunch of the CCFR field officers over on Monday night for a watch party, which was great. I mean, I'm not sure whether we were getting prepared to celebrate or commiserate, but unfortunately, it was a little bit of commiseration. So we all gathered together. I did a couple live videos. You can see them on my Facebook personal profile, and we watched the results roll in. So yeah, it was not the results we wanted. However, here's what I got to say about it. We are in a better position on Tuesday than we were on Monday. On Monday, we had a Liberal majority government. On Tuesday, we didn't. So I know that's hard to hear for a lot of people, but they're not nearly as strong as they were going into the election as they are coming out of it. So yeah, in fact, I got a couple fun election facts here that people might like. So the Trudeau Liberals received the lowest percentage of the national popular vote of any governing party in Canadian history. So nobody has ever, who was already governing, has ever scored that low in the popular vote. So that's something. They also lost the popular vote to the Conservatives, which marks only the second time in Canadian history that a governing party will form government while receiving less than 35% of the popular vote. So although they are forming government on November 20th, when they come back here to Ottawa, they are doing it with the second least support of all time. So I think that really speaks to where we're at. And also, I know there's a lot of questions about an NDP Liberal coalition. Now, today Trudeau did a press conference. He announced there will be no formal coalition. You know, everybody is freaking out about that. I got to say, the only time a coalition was ever on the table was in the event of a Conservative win. So if the Conservatives had won, but won only by a minority, then you would have seen a coalition likely form. However, the Liberals don't need the NDP because they did win a minority. The NDP, however, also weakened. So they've had their worst results since 2004, and they only won 24 seats. So they lost almost half their seats, which is surprising considering the social media and social, the young people vote that was going towards the new woke leader of the NDP. The other thing I want to say too is the Liberals saw overall 11% decline in support, while the Conservatives rose by almost 30%, 27.37% to be exact, compared to where they were in 2015. So, those are some interesting numbers. I mean, I'm not trying to split hairs. A Liberal win is still a Liberal win. However, we are now dealing with a weakened, fractured government that will absolutely be reliant on other parties to help them pass anything, including OICs or legislation. Not saying they won't have that support, but they're not in nearly as strong as position as they were in for the last 4 years. And in that time, they were only able to they passed C-71, but never did implement it. So, I guess we'll have to see how motivated they are. What other priorities this government's got. Traditionally, Trudeau seems to like to flirt with the gun stuff when he's got himself in trouble. Lord knows he does that often enough. However, he's not under the same scrutiny now as we are not in election mode. So, I don't know. These are very uncertain times. The next 12 to 18 months will definitely spell out the future for our sport in this country. And yeah. And one more thing. Less than 5% of the electorate listed gun control as a priority at all on their list of priorities. So that doesn't mean it was their top priority. That just means they listed it as a concern and a voting issue for them. Less than 5%. So overall, guns are not an issue that Canadians are wanting to even talk about, regardless of how hard the media and politicians tried to make it. A ballot question. It really wasn't. It wasn't for Canadians. So I think moving forward on any radical gun issues would be, it would be pretty different for a government in this position to do that. So I don't know. We just got to keep our eyes wide open and our ears to the ground. There's a couple NDP seats of great interest in Skeena, South Okanagan, and Nunavut. These are very rural areas with a large number of gun owners with an NDP newly elected MP. So, yeah, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen in the very near future. And the House will come back on November 20th. Justin Trudeau will appoint his gender-neutral cabinet. And I guess we'll see what the priorities for this government will be.
Yeah. To assemble all those pieces for everybody that's wondering, what does this mean to me? Am I losing my guns? Because there are people that think that they're going to be handing in AR lowers any minute now. So here's the landscape, I guess, the long and short of it. Number one, they have a minority government, so they'll need cooperation from another party if they want to pass legislation. Number two, legislation takes a long time to draft. I mean, if you look at C-71, it took the better part of 2.5 years to by the time it was passed.
Between drafting and passing.
Yeah. So it was a long process. Number three, consider that minority governments typically call an election at around the 2-year mark, because government parties, they end up almost deadlocked on a lot of things. Certainly, they're going to be deadlocked on pipelines, and the pipeline thing, the Liberals are going to need the cooperation of the Conservative Party to get pipelines passed. So there's going to be a little bit of a relationship going to have to form there at some level. And relationships, obviously, if they're reciprocal, they work quite well. If they're not, they don't work very well. So there's always that. Now, as far as gun control is concerned, what can the Liberals do right now? Well, they still have orders in council. So that's when the government, basically, you need the support of your cabinet. Cabinet has to be in place. You need support of the cabinet, or otherwise known as the executive. And then you can go down and you can actually change laws by changing regulations. So they can add guns to the prohibited list if they wanted to. But people kind of avoid doing that because that wasn't the intent of regulations, and it wasn't the intent of the order in council. The order in council and regulations, and again, this is, I'm not going to paint myself as an expert, but the intent was, it's like, well, there's been a change kind of in what's happening. Our legislation doesn't fit exactly the current situation like it didn't when we passed it, and this allows us to do some minor tweaks to make sure that it stays current and has the effect that we wanted it to. So minority governments, doing things by OIC, I wouldn't consider that to be respectable behavior. And then I guess the last thing, or second to last thing, the provisions of Bill C-71 have not been implemented yet, and they need an OIC to do that. Now, that would be an appropriate use of an OIC, order in council. So you may see that at some point in the near future. But the last point kind of relates to this one, which is how much of a priority is firearm confiscation going to be for the now diminished Liberal government? So on one token, can they just run in there, at the end of December and start banning guns? Yeah, they can do that. Is it going to stay that way? Can they just do that and say no amnesty period? Everybody hands them in within 14 days or you get arrested? I don't think that's really possible because that would cause a lot of turmoil. But as far as legislation is concerned, they may run out of time before they can even create any legislation. So anyway, those are all things for people to, there's no guarantees here and nobody knows what's going to happen. The Liberals don't even know what's going to happen because they're going to need 2 months just to figure out what they want to do. But that's what it is. So no one's losing their guns yet. But obviously there's a big fight coming.
That's right. And they ran on a platform of a 2-year amnesty. So, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Traditionally, minority governments usually don't last past 2 years. So I know for me, if there's an amnesty period in place, it means gun owners have a lot of time to really think about what they want to do. So, yeah, I wouldn't be in a big hurry, but yeah. It's the way it is, and we're going to see how things go. I'm anxious to see who fills in Ralph Goodale's seat. There's a little shining moment out of the Monday night results as we say goodbye to Ralph Goodale after 26 years of sleeping in his seat in Ottawa. He's off to the retirement home, so that's great news for gun owners. I know I was watching the results come in on CTV just because I'm boycotting CBC, but we watched the results on CTV and they talked about how, the effect that third-party political advertising, had on Ralph's riding in particular. I think it absolutely did play a part. I know we played a part in that. And I also think just the general discontent the West is having right now, justifiably so, for the situation that they find themselves in. I think that also played a major role in Ralph's exit. So,
well, Ralph was central in a lot of the monkey business that went on, especially on the firearm file, and his, I have no idea what the truth is, but I can imagine that you had Bill Blair sitting there saying, I'll literally do anything. Like I will lop off heads if that's, what keeps me in a position of power and at least a 200,000, well, in his case, probably 250, 260, $260,000 salary. I'll do whatever you want. I don't care. And those people are out there. And in my limited experience with Mr. Blair, he's exactly that type of individual. And you see those people even throughout history. If you keep looking back, you'll see people that will literally do anything and say anything. And so I think what happened was Ralph was like, I don't want anything to do with this with this thing on firearms. It's going to ruin me. So they said, no problem. We've got a guy that'll do it. No question. And they brought Blair in, created a ministry of nothing, basically a ministry of two issues, and then tried to keep Ralph in the clear, but it didn't work. Ralph ended up paying the price for it anyway, and as he should. He was a central figure in all of that.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see the mandate letters that come from the Prime Minister on both the Minister for Public Safety and the Minister for Organized Crime and Border Security, assuming that Bill keeps it. And that's assuming that they continue with that department, that newly created Ministry of Nothing, who nobody answers to. It'll be interesting to see if that gets combined back into one role as it was before, as it should be, or if they stick somebody else in the empty sleepy seat that Ralph was in. And who might that be? There's lots of talk about Mark Holland. You've also got Karen McCrimmon here in Ottawa and Kanata Carleton, who was reelected in her riding. She was Ralph Goodale's parliamentary secretary going into the election period. So, yeah, there's it's very exciting times. It's very nerve-wracking. If I was a nail biter, I'd have none. But yeah, there's a lot of questions still up in the air. We will see what happens with these very important files and who gets assigned them and what their mandate letters look like. I would assume that if the government plans to go ahead and, implement these sweeping bans and mass confiscations, that's something they would hand over to Bill Blair, because he's the only scoundrel that would be willing to, to order the door kicking. So, yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, but I'll have full reports on all that as it happens on the 20th. So,
yeah, and rest assured that the CCFR has detailed plans over the next 12 months to take it to these people like they've never seen before. So, in fact, on Monday night, this Monday night, we've got a board of directors meeting, and that's not a secret. And then we will be discussing what we're going to be doing as far as projects and whatnot, political activities and educational activities and what have you, with the board, building some kind of consensus just so that the board are in on it, for better or worse. And once that's done, we pull the trigger on the next 12 months. And I have some pretty significant, some pretty grandiose plans. And I think the government, they haven't seen anything like the CCFR before. They haven't seen anything like the stuff that we've done, but they haven't seen anything yet. So I have some pretty exciting things, and we will make those plans public when it's the appropriate time. But rest assured, there's a lot of action going on in the background, behind the scenes, and you'll see what they'll be in for if they choose to continue to attack gun owners.
That's right. I mean, the war room is just getting heated up. You're completely right. Everyone thinks, we've been taking names and kicking butts across the country, literally, for months, if not years now. And that is absolutely nothing compared to what we are prepared to do. So.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Another thing that might be going in our favor, I was watching Trudeau just an hour ago, some replays of his speech this morning, and instead of being cocky, like we're still the kings and queens of Canada, like he did on election night, he actually had the conciliatory tone and says, "Oh, I've really thought about it," like his advisors thought about it. But anyway, he's saying that he thought about it, thought about, the absolute stark rejection from Alberta and from Saskatchewan and from a lot of people in British Columbia and in Manitoba. And, he's got a serious separatist movement that's growing in popularity, and that it's real, and they're admitting that it's real. And it could happen. So he'll, as cocky as he is, and as infallible as he seems to think he is, and at some level he's right. I mean, the guy can wear blackface multiple times to be like, yeah, sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. And then it's okay. And people experience his advances differently, not him. And apparently we can all learn from his mistakes, as he
Yes, we
likes
can.
to say.
That's right.
You know, he's actually in danger of being. Did they break in to take your guns just now? What happened?
Sorry. No.
Is that Bill Blair? Is he sitting
Bill
outside
Blair's
in a van?
here.
Yeah. Is that a Blair scare?
It was a little function.
Anyway, the equipment malfunction.
Yes.
But you know, he's in danger of actually being the prime minister that caused the breakup of Canada. And what a legacy. You know, his dad almost did it. So let's hope that he has other priorities and doesn't and decides, you know what, I'm just going to take my foot off the gas on that gun thing, because that's a Western thing as well.
Oh yeah.
And let's not inflame these people any more than we have. So I don't know. It's going to be. I know it's not the outcome that we wanted, but it's going to be a really interesting period in Canada's history.
That's right. And that's what I keep telling people is there are so many bigger, huger issues right now for this floundering government that is, you know, they just suffered a huge hit. No, it's not the result we wanted. But again, we are still in a better position than we were going into the election. So, you know, we've got something to work with here, and we're going to make plans for it. And to be perfectly honest, I think you're right, considering the discontent in the West, issues with the pipelines, with Indigenous, with veterans. Like there's so many more priorities that should be holding the interests of this government, that I don't think kicking in our doors and spending billions of taxpayer dollars buying legal rifles is on the top of that list. I just can't believe it is. Well, I guess that remains to be seen.
You know, interestingly enough, the NDP, they've changed their platform, and they've changed how they're framing the firearm issue a couple of times, because somebody said the NDP aren't anti-gun. And I'm like, yes, they are. And I went to their website and looked at their platform, and they actually talk about illegally held firearms. Whereas before, they talked about handgun bans and a variety of other things. So I don't know. There's a lot of interesting movements going on right now. So we'll see.
Well, yeah. And I know a lot of the hits that the Liberals, all the seats that they lost, or the majority of them, a lot of those seats were in rural ridings. And we all know the sting of the gun vote happens most in those rural ridings. So.
All right. Well, that seems to be the landscape. And I think we've kind of clarified at least the important parts, right? Nothing's happening with your guns today. Nothing's going to be happening maybe even this year, this calendar year. So, but we're going to keep a close eye on it, and we'll definitely keep everybody updated. And even the rumblings in Ottawa, we a lot of times hear the rumors that something's coming before it comes. And we can also alert all of you guys, if you continue to listen to the podcast and continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Other than that, why don't we wrap it up for now, and we will have another podcast with Tracey soon. Thanks.
That's perfect. I'll see you Monday in the war room.
Wolverine Supply is your one-stop shop for anything and everything firearms, optics, ammunition, accessories, and archery. Exclusive Canadian distributor for the industry's top-tier brands and manufacturers, with access to some of the most sought-after products in the country. Our online store provides convenient shopping and full access to our entire inventory 24/7. For 30 years, Wolverine Supplies has been an industry leader in the firearms community and continuously strives to provide an unbeatable customer experience. Check us out online at wolverinesupplies.com, and to sign up to our newsletter, that's wolverinesupplies.com.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 49 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I really appreciate all of you guys coming back and joining me for the podcast. It seems like it's getting a larger audience all the time. And I also want to say thank you so much for your support. I may have mentioned in the last podcast, I can't remember, but in case I did forget, I do want to mention this because it's important to me. When we did the RV tour, we took in almost 3 times the amount of money in donations than the project actually cost us to do. So I have to thank all of you for getting behind us on this and and walking beside us through this whole experience. It's, as as I said before, is very stressful, and we work really hard. There's always something new going on at the CCFR, and always efforts, and we're trying new stuff that hasn't been tried, and we're continuing with things that seem to have worked before, and all that just actually equals a ton of work for our very small group. So again, that's one of the reasons why I really, really appreciate all the support. And stay tuned for in the next few weeks, and you'll start to hear some of the stuff that we're going to be doing this year to make sure that the Liberal Party will not get away clean with attacking gun owners, via legislation or regulatory changes. All right. Again, thanks for joining me. Take care, and we'll see you all soon.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.